What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Yesterday, we had multiple surprise Switch 2 enhancements that were announced, adding upgrades to some highly praised games previously that are going to be pushing the limits a bit more with the Switch 2, and we even had some updates around backwards compatibility, fixing some issues that have come up this in Nintendo's latest update, but we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Marathon as it has now resurfaced with a price point, release timing, and a healthy amount of skepticism online. And we also have an incredible release in the retro scene, especially if you're someone who maybe remembers the SEGA channel or has been curious about it. Well, you can revisit that entire library of fairly unique titles, especially with the delivery side of things, right now. Yeah, so all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps it a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic. And massive, massive announcement at the Game Awards. People are very excited. Very clear, though, it's quite early on, but we're thinking, as the rumor is going around, 2030 could be optimistic. Well, with that rumor that was circulating, we have Casey Hudson, who decided to chime in here, of course, is leading the way for this project. You can see this over on social media, saying, don't worry about the not till 2030 rumors. Game will be out before then. I'm not getting any younger, and this is hopefully something that doesn't end up aging poorly. I'd like this game to come out sooner rather than later, of course, and with it in early development, it's with how we see games get delayed all the time, and generally the timetables for games to even get completed nowadays, it isn't hard to believe that if it recently started development, that it would be like 5 years before it comes out. It is on Unreal Engine, so I know that does tend to at least work to accelerate game development more than if you were working on an original engine or something like that. So we'll see if that does lend itself, hopefully, well to the game when we've seen Unreal Engine 5 cause nightmare scenarios around stuttering and stuff. But at least for now, according to Casey Hudson, we'll see it before 2030, which on its own sounds kind of crazy. Be like, oh, the game that just got announced 2025, we'll get it before 2030. Also, with the announcement of Mega Man Dual Override, we do have what you would expect from Capcom, a competition for people to design a robot master. This we can see over on their account, and they've done this multiple. I mean, for a while there, it was a running tradition, especially for the older Mega Man games here. But the robot master design contest for Mega Man Dual Override is now open. They say they're looking for designs of a robot master who has a right arm with immense suction powers, really testing the willpower of the internet on that one. But people have been, if you go on places like X and stuff, people are posting all kinds of fan art and imagery of what they would think a robot master with that kind of design or that kind of power would look like. So people are at least having fun with it, and the reward is your design for the robot master. We'll get into the game. Again, they've done this for a bunch of the old Mega Man games. This isn't necessarily new for them. It's just, I think, cool to see that they're continuing with the tradition, and I guess we'll find out who comes up with the best design for the robot master that has a right arm that literally sucks. Oh, and we did get a sales update for Hollow Knight Silksong. This we can see over on Team Cherry's website, where they say, we wanted to say a huge thank you to all the players who've braved Silksong's distant and dangerous lands. That's over 7 million of you who've purchased the game, alongside millions more playing on Xbox Game Pass. So if you just think that, oh, well, just conservatively, 10 million people maybe total have played it, it is interesting that Team Cherry decided to tell us how many people have bought the game as opposed to just saying 10 million players. I don't mind it, though, kind of to divide that up between the subscription service that they're in there with Game Pass, then how many people have legitimately just bought the game outright then? I mean, it was $20, so it's not like they went, oh, you gotta spend $70 for this. No, they were very fair with the amount of money they were asking for a game that it is quite large. I mean, there's a lot to Hollow Knight Silksong. You certainly will get your money's worth, and that probably plays into the 7 million copies sold. But that's not all they had to tell us about Hollow Knight Silksong, which we're about to get into now. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a bunch of just almost random announcements for Switch 2 and other platforms, but definitely some Switch 2 enhancements that people were really hoping to hear about, especially one in particular with how it runs on the Switch 1. But we'll start here, though, again, with Team Cherry, as there is additional content coming to Hollow Knight Silksong. This over on that same website, where they say new areas, bosses, tools, and more. Hornet's adventures continue in our nautically themed expansion coming free for all players next year. We'll keep further details secret for now, but expect additional info shortly before Hollow Knight Silksong Sea of Sorrow releases. So, I mean, awesome to see them just adding on more content, but even better, it's just free for all players next year. And I mean, let's face it, we know Team Cherry is a small studio. A couple of people make that up, right? But them selling 7 million copies, even taking the cut from the platform holders, usually about 30%, they're doing quite well. Like, just outright with this game. And, of course, how many copies of just Hollow Knight they've sold, which we have some information on that as well. They detail this in that same blog post on their website, saying Hollow Knight Nintendo Switch 2 Edition incorporates all the updates and enhancements that Silksong received on the platform, high frame rate modes, higher resolutions, and many additional graphical effects. As with Silksong, players who own a copy of Hollow Knight on Nintendo Switch will be able to download the new Nintendo Switch 2 Edition for free when it launches in 2026. And Hollow Knight, outright, the first one, has been on sale multiple times now across all platforms, is certainly on the Switch 1 as well. This is good stuff, just to see them go back and even update a game that I'm sure there are a lot of people who got wrapped up in the Silksong hype, bought that maybe even on a whim. Again, it was $20, so they're not exactly asking for a massive premium of $70 something on the game. So it is kind of in that impulse buy territory, just going off of how excited people were for it and then the reviews that came out. So maybe you didn't play the first Hollow Knight game, and now, oh, cool, I got it on the Switch 2, and they're adding in the higher frame rate, which is like 120 FPS mode, and the game itself on the Switch 1, once again, you stretch those games out to the 1080p display on the Switch 2, can look a bit blurry at times. Now, Hollow Knight's more, I'll say more simplistic graphical style versus something that's fully 3D and trying to look hyper-realistic won't necessarily be as bad or as blurry, but it also can look very, very sharp, as we see with Hollow Knight Silksong when it's designed outright for the Switch 2 platform. But then, not to be outdone, Larian decided to just randomly announce Divinity Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition with this trailer here, and now we have it on the Xbox Series X, the PS5, and the Switch 2. Remember, the other platforms, so the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One had a version that was through backwards compatibility, same with the Switch 1, but the Switch 1 was crunchy. The resolution was quite low, it struggled just to run the game outright. The Switch 2 version seems to be the biggest upgrade from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2 versus PS4 to PS5 or something like that, where the Switch 2 at least, it looks legible, I guess is the best way to describe it. Now with like the PS5, the Xbox Series, I did boot it up on the PS5 just to see. It is running at 60 FPS, which is nice, and it has PS5 Pro support, so I saw that tag and was like, oh cool, it's actually supporting this. The console that I have, the PS5 Pro, it is very touch and go if the game you're about to download even has that support right now, especially from third parties. It was a nice surprise to see that PS5 Pro enhancement there, but also it's on sale across the board. So PS5 and Xbox Series, I saw it was $15. On the Switch 2, it's $25. Once again, working into that impulse buy territory for a game that people absolutely love and will recommend over and over again because it's legitimately like 100+ hours of content. Oh, and then we also have some backwards compatibility fixes for the Switch 2. You can see this over on Nintendo Life. That is in the latest update, as some of these games broke with a previous update, then Nintendo put out another update to fix some of these. So some of the big ones, I mean, like Blade of Darkness, Resident Evil 4, Miitopia, Streets of Rage 4, Sports Party. I mean, there are a few games in here that I looked at and I was like, I mean, Game Dev Story Plus Plus, I'm not really familiar with that one, but they're like Little Nightmares Complete Edition. Basically, Nintendo has been working kind of behind the scenes, not necessarily putting it out there on a big billboard as to, oh, we fixed these games in this update. They're quiet updates to fix a lot of the games in the backwards compatibility program, and they're getting closer and closer to that 100% mark. I don't know if they ever get there because there's just some games that don't work from the Switch 1 generation with like Labo or Ring Fit Adventure, stuff like that, I guess. But here they're at least making a pretty good effort to continue seeing community feedback for games that are struggling, and in this case, working to at least fix them up to where they run well enough on the Switch 2. It's also going to be up to the third-party developers to take a game and then enhance it for the Switch 2, as we just talked about right now with Hollow Knight and then with Divinity Original Sin 2. But at least Resident Evil 4 will work again. So there you go. Make sure you have, of course, your Switch 2 updated. And if you had to put any of these games maybe on the back burner for a bit while you're waiting for it to get fixed, those ones are now. Next up, let's talk about Marathon, which has resurfaced. Remember, this game was already supposed to be out a couple of months ago, but Bungie ended up delaying it into 2026. Seemed like they had to work some things out with community feedback, as they've been running these closed alpha tests that have NDAs all over them. But the reason for that, obviously, is so they can try to give this game the best chance possible when it launches in 2026. They also seem to work out the whole thing around the art plagiarism stuff, as it appears there's some kind of settlement there just based on the statements that were put out online that very much look like lawyers wrote them. But with all of that done, there was a video that was posted by the developers there at Bungie around this game and some of the things that they've decided to, we'll say, fix based on what the community was saying. Now, in this video, it's about 20 minutes or so, they go over the release timing, which is just March 2026. They didn't give an exact release date. I was a little surprised on that one, but it is $40 as kind of expected. You see games that aren't necessarily free to play, like your Arc Raiders, that come out, and they're not the full price of $60 or $70. They come in mostly at that $40 range, so that's kind of what we were expecting Marathon to be. It was getting beaten down a lot, clearly, when it was first shown, to where people were calling for free to play. Didn't seem like that was ever really an actual plan by Bungie or Sony for this thing. But we have to wait and see when exactly it's coming out in March. Again, kind of strange they weren't ready with an exact release when the release date when the game is out in, we figure, 4 months. Still though, they will have a roadmap of free gameplay updates, including new maps, runner shells, events, and more. The reward passes, so your battle passes, they will not expire. They're not going to lean into the idea of being FOMO driven to where it's timed for so long and then it just goes away completely. No, you'll just always have access to them, and you can purchase and unlock prior passes. Again, they'll just be available, I guess, in their store. So if you want to grab one that even was there at launch a few years later, apparently that should be possible. And they have stressed over and over again, it will not be paid to win, which I guess that means they're going to look towards cosmetics and other ways to customize your runner, as opposed to just giving you a really nice gun for $10. Some of the new features that they've outlined here since alpha does include proximity chat. Remember, there's a big thing for an extraction shooter, as the idea would be you can talk to any of the random people you find out in that world when you're trying to navigate through it and either form alliances or I guess just smack talk them while you take them out. Also a solo queue, another big thing that was brought up, since then you would be required to bring someone with you or roll the dice with randoms. I'm curious how that works though, because if you go into an instance solo, but there are groups of people around you who are going into it, I don't know how that works. Will you have more armor or run faster or something to kind of even the odds there? Or they just say, hey, you know what, you're going into a solo, you know what you're getting into. There's also a Rook Runner shell, which is kind of a scavenger, I guess, to where you can get into these maps and you'll get bonuses that way. Now, Dead Runners, so you go through the game, right, and you take people out. Rather than the dead runners that would then come from that would explode into pieces, they just drop as corpses. And the cool thing here is when they're a corpse, they will decay over time. So you'll know, I guess if you run into one that's not fully decayed, oh, there was a firefight that happened here somewhat recently, and it'll give you a chance to, I guess, get your bearings and set up a strategy from there. They go over 4 maps. There's Perimeter, Dire Marsh, Outpost, and then their endgame challenge being Cryo Archive. And they just say you customize through looting. So again, I'm curious how they're going to make that more forgiving, because that seems to be something else they really want to do. Extraction shooters can be kind of intimidating or frustrating to people. If you put a bunch of time in and then you go into one of these maps and you die, all your stuff gets taken from you, and then you just kind of stop playing. That is something that a lot of these extraction shooters have to kind of wrestle with, player interaction with each other, but then also feel like you have to start from square one and you just wasted 10 or 20 hours of your time. Seems like Marathon is going to try to lean more towards being forgiving around all of that, so I'm interested to see how exactly they make that happen, but they're still off on their back foot. It seemed like people were a little more open to this game after this recent presentation, like, oh, yeah, it does look a lot better. Even the visuals, the environments and stuff do. I still need to see the gameplay loop and how they may work it out to where it's an extraction shooter. So you do have the idea of nervously, I guess, going through and navigating these different instances, gathering rewards and loot while trying to avoid people or hunt them down, but then also try to make it a bit more balanced and, I mean, let's face it, more mainstream outright for an extraction shooter. Arc Raiders has been very successful at this time, so I don't know if that's a positive or negative for Marathon. I was kind of back and forth, like, okay, Arc Raiders is really eating up a lot of that player base or that kind of that genre right now, but it also maybe is getting people into the genre who weren't previously, and they might be interested in Marathon. Hard to say, but looking towards March now, about 4 months from today, and we'll see how this one goes over at $40. Certainly let me know down in the comments if this presentation sold you a bit more on it or just kind of reinforced the idea that you're not really interested in it. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about an awesome release for the retro scene. And this has to do with the SEGA channel. And if any of you remember that back in the day, it was the first time I remember of games on demand, and you would pop this pretty large looking cartridge device into your Sega Genesis, and then you would screw in a coax cable from your cable jack on the wall, and then all of a sudden you'd have games delivered directly to your Sega Genesis. Back then, remember, days of dial-up, it felt like witchcraft. And there were some downsides to it that we'll actually be talking about here in a second, but take a look at this. This is posted by the Video Game History Foundation. In collaboration with multiple parties, we have recovered over 100 new SEGA channel ROMs, including system data, exclusive games, and even prototypes that were never published. This collection includes nearly 100 unique system ROMs covering almost every version of the system that was distributed to customers from 1994 to mid-1997. This batch also includes system ROM prototypes and truly unusual experiments, like a Sega Genesis web browser that would have delivered compressed static websites over television cable. Of great interest to fans, this collection of ROMs also has dozens of previously undumped game variants and Sega Channel exclusives. This includes Garfield Caught in the Act, The Lost Levels, and The Flintstones, the two games that were previously believed to be permanently lost and unrecoverable. These are both interesting from a development standpoint. Both games appear to have their roots as abandoned projects that were repurposed as Sega Channel exclusive content. Also included are the previously unpreserved limited editions of Sega Genesis games. These versions have been cut down to fit within Sega Channel's file size limit, sometimes omitting content or splitting the game into multiple parts. We're not sure anyone is excited, especially eager to play a version of Super Street Fighter 2 missing half the characters, but we're glad to have it documented. I specifically remember that for Mortal Kombat 3. They split the characters into two parts. You had Mortal Kombat 3 Part 1 and then Part 2, and that's exactly what it sounded like. You went into the character select screen, and half the characters were just like gray blocks, or like they were faded out characters, so you couldn't pick them. You had to go to Part 2, which did introduce the limitation of, Sindel can't fight Sub-Zero because they're in Part 1 and Part 2 opposite parts. But that's just kind of how it was back then, because you did have limited space on that the RAM on that cartridge that would download the data from their servers. So it was very, very early days. But this is awesome because this has been fully released. There is a torrent that they posted with 140 something files that are all ROMs, and you can download it and try out these different versions of the games from the Sega channel yourself right now. And I'm sure there are gonna be people who maybe even compile all these together and maybe try to set up that entire environment for the Sega channel. I don't think it's gonna get to the point where you can reuse those Sega channel carts if you have them. I actually have one, so if it ever does happen, we'll try it, but it wouldn't shock me if somebody maybe put an image together with all these different games loaded on there, the 140 something or so that they have, along with a web browser maybe, and then you could load that up in an emulator or on a flash cart and have everything in front of you. Well, on the menu system, all the different parts for games, really, really cool stuff. They're awesome find and release here by the Video Game History Foundation. I don't get to talk about them much because they'll scan magazines. That's cool. But this is something you can check out right now, and it is a legitimate move for preservation. So good stuff there. I'll have a link down below if you want to read more over on the website, and then they do have a link out to the torrent where you can check out these files for yourself. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, of these, what was the first console generation you went online with? Not surprising, PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii. It was a massive generation at that time where we moved into the online space for consoles. All three of these systems had some sort of functionality, whether, of course, playing games online, but the storefronts, online storefronts, started to show up and started to merge together with these consoles that came out day one with the PS4, Xbox One, and the Wii U, just about across the board for full retail releases. PS2, GameCube, Xbox, and Dreamcast. While I didn't really go online right away with my Dreamcast, the original Xbox, man, I was online constantly with that thing. Of course, Halo 2 was the big one because that really leaned into the social environment with the headset, and you'd really get into a room with your friends, go like matchmake, play Halo 2, but also just be able to kind of hang out, chat, and yeah, virtually hang out. But like it was a really cool thing to do when the next day you had to be up early for school, but you could jump on Halo 2 with some friends at 8 or 9 o'clock for an hour or so before bed and get some matches in that way. But that was kind of, for me, the big first push for consoles online with that social environment with that original Xbox. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Ryan, who says, please God, let the AI bubble burst in 2026. People are really pushing for this, the idea of AI just exploding in these companies' faces, and then they have to offload a lot of this stuff, and we get flooded with solid state drives or RAM or any of the components, then all of a sudden become available overnight and prices plummet for us on the consumer level side, right? But here's the other aspect is I do think a lot of these contracts are already going to end up in 2027. Contracts that Samsung or SK Hynix or Micron have with some of these big companies that are building data centers and procuring all these parts. I think those contracts are kind of spoken for the next 12 to 18 months. But the other aspect of this is AI, again, it's being pushed as this is going to solve all the problems. One of the problems that is believed to be solved is the efficiency side, as in it won't need this amount of processing power to do what it's doing now, but in a few years. Still sounds like it might be a bit of a pipe dream, and we're just like, hey, name a problem. And before you even name it fully, I say AI will solve that. That's kind of weird to me that it's like, don't worry, we're gonna put ourselves behind the 8 ball now, but AI will get us out of it. So, hey, we'll see what happens here in the next 2 years. I'm thinking by the end of 2027, we'll know which way we're going, either in apparently full-blown utopia or full-blown crash. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll have it up here in a card. Or maybe you want to check out a recent cheap build that I did to play some of the classic PS2 and GameCube games in 4K through emulation. I'll leave that in the video right below it. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.